Back in 2014, Keith Farley received an email from his agent. It told him that he'd just landed a role in an upcoming video game and he'd be an off-camera principal performer, which didn't actually tell him very much at all. In layman's term, that means it's a voice acting gig and they probably didn't need him to do any motion capture. At this point in time, he doesn't actually know who he'll be working for, what the game is called, or in fact, any details about the character he'll be playing. No, all he knows is where to show up, what time he needs to be there, and how much he'll be paid for the day's work. Now, this level of secrecy isn't particularly uncommon when you're an actor in the games industry, he told me. Publishers are eager to avoid leaks, and while actors have been known to cause them, and so whenever possible, they're expected to work on a need-to-know basis. But that raises a couple of interesting points. What does an actor need to know when working on a project, and when exactly do they need to know it? We're going to have a stab at answering both of those questions a little later on. So Farley turns up to his recording session as instructed and meets the production team he's going to be working with, but before they can really start discussing the project at all, he's asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement, promising not to share any of what he learns here with the outside world, which means if he does end up leaking the game before it's announced, he's going to face some kind of financial penalty. He signs, eager to find out what it is that they're going to be working on, and the production team starts raving about what a massive franchise this is, what a big hit the game could be, and he says, cool, alright, well, what's it called? Unfortunately, they tell him he's not allowed to know that. Farley finds this frustrating, as you'd imagine, but the script he's handed is well written and he's given some decent direction as to what his character needs to sound like, dark and film noir being the gist of it. Although even then, he was only just in that moment learning that he'd be playing one of the game's antagonists. But he gets on with it because that's what he's paid to do and completes the session. They're somewhere up to 4 hours long if you're a voice actor. It's pretty clear they'll need him back at some point because they don't finish the script they're working through, but due to the nature of game development, nobody can tell him exactly how many lines he has left to voice. Some of them won't even have been written yet. Which means what happened instead, and once again this isn't uncommon within the games industry, is that every couple of months his agent would receive a phone call and this mystery project would book him in for another session or two. He'd go in, record his lines, leave, and then the next month or the month after that, get another phone call asking him to come back in and do some more. And this process would go on for about a year and a half, and during that entire time period, he was never told that he was voicing a character called Conrad Kellogg for a game that was going to be called Fallout 4. If you've played this game, now that it's been released, you know that's not an insignificant role.
So you see, it is the end of the line. Not the way you imagine.
In fact, Farley would only eventually find out he'd been working on Bethesda's extremely popular post-nuclear RPG series because one of the other actors on the project, who also hadn't been told what the game was called, was a massive Fallout fan and managed to figure it out while reading the script and then let him know. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But having spoken to Keith Farley and also another voice actor, Phil Lamar, who you might know best for voicing Samurai Jack, this is happening to a lot of performers. Although this is perhaps an extreme example, there's a growing concern that actors are being kept at arm's length by video game publishers, and it's leading to a bunch of major problems. For a start, and we touched upon this briefly already, the performance itself is suffering. The less an actor knows about their character and the world that that character inhabits, the more difficult it will be for them to understand any of the nuance. If an actor isn't told they're working on Fallout, it robs them of the chance to fully understand its dark humour and its history. And that seems like a loss all around, to be honest. There's also a more cynical angle to consider. If an actor isn't told they're voicing a character in Fallout 4, a game that, let's not forget, shipped 12 million copies to retailers around the world for its launch day, how are they supposed to properly negotiate their fee for that work? They can't. Now, the publisher's argument would be that they're protecting themselves against leaks, and despite the fact that actors are signing NDAs promising not to share this stuff, it's still much safer for them to keep the details vague. They need to think big picture, that's their defense. Well, unsurprisingly, now that we're talking about money, this is where things start to get quite messy. In October of last year, an organisation called the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists went on strike. This is a labour union made up of something like 160,000 actors, and the strike was aimed squarely at the video games industry, or more specifically, 11 companies, including the likes of Activision and Electronic Arts. No union actor would take on voice acting or motion capture work with these companies until their demands were met. As of recording this episode of Here's the Thing, the strike is ongoing. The union's demands include better transparency. They want their actors to be properly informed about the projects they work on, although even then there's some room for negotiation, I'm told. Actors like Farley and Lamar understand it's not entirely feasible for them to learn the full details of a game at the audition stage, but if they land the role, they would prefer to find that stuff out, particularly the name of the game in question. But even if that is an issue for the publisher, they would accept the idea that although the actor may not find out the full details, their agent would, and then at least after signing an NDA, they would be able to more efficiently represent their client. On top of that, there are concerns about vocal stress and stunt safety too. Lamar, who voiced Ratbag in Shadow of Mordor, also did the character's performance capture too, and one scene sees him strung up by a group of orcs, and Lamar recalls being asked to shoot that scene, which would require the actor himself to be strung up without any stunt safety professionals. He almost did it too, had it not been for another actor telling him that was crazy and that he shouldn't be expected to do anything like that without the proper setup. But the impression I get is that the real sticking point in this strike, and the reason negotiations have barely started even at this stage, all these months later, is that the actors are also asking for bonus payments. This comes back to the idea that working on a game like Fallout 4, from a financial perspective, is different to working on a game like Thomas Was Alone. At this point in time, I'm told the voice actors are asking for an additional day's wage, which is typically in the hundreds of dollars, per 2 million units of a game sold, and that's up to a maximum of 4 additional payments. So if the game they worked on sells 8 million copies, they get 4 days extra pay, and if the game sells 80 million copies, they still only get 4 days extra pay. Although these might not sound like unrealistic demands, as I said, so far the companies targeted by this strike are yet to really engage in negotiations with the union, and so clearly there is a dispute here, and it's starting to have an impact on the games we're going to play. The biggest example so far being Ashley Birch, who voiced Chloe in Life is Strange. She recently turned down the opportunity to play the same character in the game's prequel, a decision she doesn't appear to have made lightly, and as a result, she's been replaced by a non-union actor. In a recent interview with the prequel's developer, Deck9 Games, Eurogamer was told the following: "It really challenged us. We were well into development when that kind of problem arose. We contemplated lots of different ways to react, including abandoning the project." They thought about abandoning the project. That sounds pretty extreme and maybe even a little unbelievable, but it does suggest that developers and publishers are starting to feel the pressure at least. So why aren't negotiations happening? I've seen some grumblings online that voice actors and motion capture performers don't deserve bonus payments and better contracts if gameplay programmers and artists and audio engineers aren't also receiving those same kind of benefits. And I totally agree, but I also think that doesn't necessarily mean the actors are in the wrong. I think it actually means the entire industry might need to change. It seems to me that these actors are setting what could be a very important example, one that games publishers likely find frightening. If they give in to the demands of the acting community, what's to say that they won't inspire the programmers to unionize as well? Developers often work unbelievable hours. How many stories have we already heard about the horrors of crunch? And with proper unions, that could be addressed, or at the very least, better compensated. I think that's partly what this whole conversation is all about. If you take a step back, it's bigger than just the voice acting strike. It's about the whole thing. It's about how games get made, it's about unionization, it's about giving gameplay programmers a proper voice within the world in which they work. And yeah, to think we got here from an anecdote about Conrad Kellogg in Fallout 4, not bad, but that sometimes happens in Here's the Thing. So yes, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this episode, please do give it a like, because it means more people might stumble into it and watch. That'd be nice. And yes, if this is your first one, there's a new episode every 2 weeks. Here are some recent examples. Well, actually, this one's recent. It's about the cancelled Prey 2 and what it would look like had development not been halted. And this one isn't recent, but is relevant sort of to this video. It's about the sex formula in the original Fallout, and it's weird and fun, and I really like it. So yeah, maybe check that one out if you haven't already. And if you have, then cool. I'll see you next time in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.